before I talk about this map of the female psyche that just emerged from so long working with women. And I love mythology. I love archetypal psychology. I love this way that we can communicate through understanding story. And it kind of really honors the wiser part of all of us, right? So rather than just have like a bland curriculum that is often there in maybe a psychology degree or something like that, I really feel we all know, you know, when we're working with storytelling, mythology, and we're gaining understanding from what is already in the collective unconscious. For example, the story of Eve and Lilith. I mean, it doesn't matter what culture you're from, those energies are present all the time. Women kind of have a sense of what Eve energy might be and what Lilith energy might be. And there are so many expressions of Lilith, so many expressions of Eve, and both have their light and shadow. And there's like a big gradient to that for each of them. And it's such a big thing to open up the Eve and Lilith framework that I do teach in this training, and that women that come through this get to learn how to totally apply it to themselves and their own lives and experience immense liberation and reconnection with lost parts of themselves and really integrating it and finding more wholeness. It's a huge journey that we take, but I really just want to kind of mention it today so that you understand that, you know, your deeper knowing of you as a woman, of you as a soul, is part of this, right? Like I think, one of you here wrote to me and you were like, I don't just want to take in someone else's knowledge and wisdom, like I want to unearth my own. And I'm like, this is what it's about. This is the real deal of self-leadership, is how I replied, right? Because you, on a deeper part of your own nature, I mean, that is being called out of you in the journey. And yes, I'm sharing with you frameworks and practices, but it's not like I said in the masterclass live stream videos, right? It's not just about this therapy and that technique and that coaching and la, la, la. It's about your journey front and center. And these powerful resources support that along the way. And so this it's kind of simple, the Eve and Lilith framework, this map of the female psyche, but it's also kind of vast and complex at the same time, if that makes sense. And yes, so just super briefly, in case anyone has been kind of impacted or infected by this bizarre twist on the Eve and Lilith story, and they think that in order for women to find wholeness, they can only express Eve type energies. And let's just define briefly what that would be, right? So cooperative, harmony, beauty, nurturing, mothering, partnering, marriage, right? Like homemaker, childbearer, creatrix of life in that way, especially in the very human world. On a more developed level, you know, that's really connected to our hearts and our capacity for emotional intelligence and being able to communicate well. And so it's kind of like the heart expression of embodied feminine leadership. That's like the epitome of where developed Eve energy can go to. I don't know if you've even encountered this, but in case you do, I want to mention it so that you don't get confused. There are some people out there trying to say at the moment that in order to find feminine wholeness, we actually need to reject Lilith because she's only demonic, she's only bad, she's only dense, She's only all the shadowy things. So where that perspective is coming from is some esoteric information that is coming through some channels. A lot of people are parroting it, and I 1000% agree with them. But that's one aspect of Lilith. That's the aspect of, and this is like relating the mythology of woman to you as an individual woman personally. Okay, I mean, we aren't you know, in like hardcore demonic expressions in our lives. None of us would be having this conversation if that were the case. But like there's a gradient, there's a range to the shadow, to the light of both. And it's my understanding and my direct experience from working with people who have both been in the victim position, the perpetrator position, all of this, that it's the spirit of rejection. It's the self-abandonment. It's the not being embraced that causes someone to split off into really disconnected behaviors. Is everybody with me here? Like, and let's make this more relatable for something that, you know, because everyone has some form of addiction. You know, addiction is not just like an obvious alcohol or drug addiction or food addiction. I mean, there are so many. Phones, for example, the digital world, sugar, caffeine, there are so many that are commonly accepted. But anyway, when it comes to the more hardcore ones that maybe you've been through, or you for sure would know someone who has, like someone who goes to that expression, they're in pain, they are suffering. A human soul of God, of source, does not disconnect for no reason. They are damaged, they are traumatized, they have been abused. And this is what I've learned from the women that have deepened my capacity as a healer in the past year, that they've directly experienced trauma at the hands of some of the darkest people on the freaking planet. And those women who were abused, very, very like intensely healed, right, and very integrated now, are very clearly saying, no child is born evil. Like, we're all women here, even if you don't have children. If you think of a baby, an infant human baby, they are pure, they are innocent. Something very wrong has got to happen to have someone just completely freaking disconnect from themselves, from love, from their own nature, right? And that's the kind of deep compassion and understanding that we need to bring to our own selves and to our understanding of the craziness that's happening in the world as well. But anyway, so in this distorted perception that some are running about Lilith, they don't get it in terms of what healing actually takes. That when you reject and push an aspect away, it only grows bigger, you know, and tends to sabotage things. I mentioned this in the live stream, right? And so it's like when you have no fear because you are so source God connected and you understand that everything is looking for healing. Everything, every energy that is out there is on its journey back home to source, to God. And so there's a certain way we relate with ourselves in that, which is about not living ongoingly with shame, not living ongoingly with trauma that toxifies our perception and, you know, maybe creates destructive communication and all these things that are typically expressions of that distorted, shadowy, pain body kind of energy. But Lilith is actually the part of the feminine nature that so many women are longing to know, because in the extreme shadow is one aspect of her profound range. And in her most developed part, you know, she is that part of us that is so intuitive and so wise and so connected to her ancientness, her multidimensional nature beyond the physical plane, beyond just being a lowly human. Like she's the one that has that sovereign, spiritually sovereign connection. She's that ancient priestess, right? Like she is the power of birth, both of birthing ourselves and birthing human life. You know, she's that wild, instinctual force of nature itself. She's pleasure, she's sexuality, right? And this is what so many women are longing to connect with when it comes to feminine work, when it comes to embodiment, exploration. These are the parts of ourselves, you know, where it activates our own voice and our own authentic presence, instead of just being more pleasing and socially acceptable and locking your true self down, you know, like suppressing your voice, not, you know, having all this discord with people in your life because there's so much codependency and people pleasing over on this side, you know, of the less developed Eve energy. But this is very, very common. So this is like the most socially acceptable. And there's a lot of distortion that happens in that. So much passive aggression, so much autoimmune conditions, so much, you know, because when Lilith is suppressed, she's going to let you know that she's not happy about it. And that's going to come out in all kinds of ways. I was speaking to a beautiful woman recently about the this like hunger to have another baby in her. So being Lilith being the primal feminine doesn't care if it makes sense of the timing, like they need to move house and they need to like have a better financial foundation. The primal feminine does not care about that. And so if she is just pushed down and whatever, like she'll come up and sabotage the whole thing and get pregnant like tomorrow if she's not acknowledged and considered and honored. This stuff happens all the time. And so it's also, you know, a big, big dance between man and woman, right? And I recognize that there's many genders, but I'm speaking about man and woman for a moment, because Eve is the one that through religion, through the indoctrination of, I like how Yogananda calls it churchianity, which is not true Christianity in how I know it. It is, you know, it's created the environment that so many of us are living in socially, the religious distortions. It's shaped our psyches, right? And so think of the Madonna and the whore. I've worked with a lot of men as well as women, particularly in the past. Even the ones who are like the most switched on, seem like they're the most spiritual, most self-aware, the most developed, most into men's work and all of that, hardly any of them didn't have a porn addiction. Hardly any. I could count on one hand actually, after hundreds of spiritual sexual activation sessions I did with men in the past. So many men go and see escorts without their partners ever knowing. Because when woman has been shaped and controlled to be this like socially acceptable Eve, there are all these parts of herself that she doesn't get to know and learn about. And, you know, so Lilith, when she is suppressed and pushed out of society, that need to want to experience a more like wild feminine expression that is just unto herself, not just trying to please everyone and take care of everyone and over mother everyone. That's a genuine longing in man. And when I did so many years in like my modern sexuality temple that I created. And I had so many men and women and couples coming for many, many years when I lived in Melbourne. This was like before hardly anyone was working with Tantra. Now there's Tantra workshop on every weekend somewhere in Australia or Bali or Byron Bay, do you know what I mean? Or wherever you are in the world. At that time, hardly anyone was doing it. And I had all these women coming to me and saying, can you teach me how to do this healing work with men like you're doing? And I could like see this thing starting to build, and my guidance, my intuition really strongly showed me something else instead, because what I'm all about is contributing to our wholeness. I do think there needs to be some people in healing roles, right? But to not let that become some big identity and some huge thing that happens in the culture. What I would rather do is empower women to know themselves at that level, and for a man and woman in the one family in the same relationship to actually be with each other at a deeper level, so that that wholeness is happening under as many home family roofs as possible in the world. Do you know what I mean? And we are so capable of that. And that's when Tigress really flowered and kind of exploded for the next decade or so while I was living in Australia. And so equipping ourselves, educating ourselves, embodying more of our full spectrum feminine range is what can catalyze everything that's aligned for you, everything that you actually really want, basically.